welcome to Holy Shit Mode in Pursuit of Perfection. I'm super excited to finally start this mini web series.
My gosh.
What are we going to be talking about today, Mr. Almost Dr. Castro?
Well, my esteemed colleagues and I have determined that the most appropriate course of action is to understand the study and the state of audio as we know it, and perhaps identify some problems that could be the case.
All right. Where do we
In
start?
layman's terms, what's wrong with this shit?
Yeah. So where do we start with this?
We have to talk about how we're not talking about sound, because I feel like it's a weird thing. Maybe it's just because I'm hard of hearing, and that's kind of the way I go about things, is to try to touch everything and feel everything and have this weird relationship with sound. But I noticed that since I was like 7 years old or 8 years old or something like that, there's been like this plateau of like stuff just stopped mattering about sound itself and more about feature sets and about making stuff easier and user accessible, which is great, and I'm never against that. But it's like a weird thing that all of a sudden we stopped caring about like how to make stuff better. Like every year after that, my dad used to tell me about how he used to have and I actually have his speakers from like the 80s, these flat panel speakers where they tried this different diaphragm and they converted it. It's so cool. But and then like he was like, yeah, then this company did this, and then Bose came out, and then this came out, and then all this stuff was progressing, and then that was it. And then everyone's like, I have my driver that has 10% more carbon than this driver. And it's like, it doesn't change anything. We're stuck. We're stuck in this state. So I figured that'd be a good topic for today, is trying to figure out why are we stuck with audio, and where do we go from here?
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect because it allows us to really dive into different audio experiences, what exists out there, different technologies, what's in the news, what people are raving about. But I mean, overall, we're just here in the pursuit of perfection. Like we want that perfect audio. So we're gonna deep dive in how do we find it and where do we go from there. But as you
I think
noticed,
that's a Porsche thing too.
Wait, what was it?
I think Porsche has the pursuit of perfection.
I think they do. You might be right about this one. But
We might have to cut that out, but we'll just run for it for now.
yeah, no, it's
You know what? Actually, hold on. If Porsche were to ever use the highest end sound system, they already use Bose for high-end sound systems.
True.
So if they're truly looking for the pursuit of perfection, they would look for the audio company who's also looking for the pursuit of perfection.
That's true. We're going to keep that in there. So we're not taking that out, no matter what. But as you notice, right here on the side, we do have a nice little Miro board, which we're going to use to explain and define all the craziness that we're about to talk about. Because generally speaking, when it comes to understanding how audio works, it is confusing. And as you brought up earlier, if we talk about sound, it's hard to understand or perceive anything. But I think it's important to start from ground zero. What is the basic sound experience we're experiencing right now?
That's a great question. So the way that we've been experiencing sound for the last century has been the same. It's been the same. And it's all based off how our eardrums work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, which makes sense, right? The best way to try to reproduce something for your eardrums to receive is to try to reproduce it like an eardrum, right? Like an inverse eardrum. And essentially, every speaker that has ever existed is basically a reverse eardrum. Instead of being sensitive and detecting your frequency, it just generates a frequency over airwaves, right? Your ears, well, most people's ears, mine are kind of shaped a little weird, but they're designed to funnel air, vibrations from the air, and they shoot it inside your ear. And then it goes down your ear canal, and on the inside of your head, you have these eardrums, or most people have eardrums, and then they're like a microphone, essentially a microphone capsule, and they detect all the little vibrations in the air. And that's great. That's fantastic. If we get to that point to have the ultimate quality of air vibrations, that's fantastic. But the bad part is that air is not the same everywhere. And that is the critical part about why studios do sound deadening, sound absorption, sound dampening, all these things in studios. Studios spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to fix the problem of space and air. Because if you think about it, humans are the thing that have changed over the last millennia. Right? Our ears haven't changed, and of course we built speakers to kind of emulate what we're doing with ears, but we've moved inside, right? Our ears are designed for outside use, wide open fields and forests and other ecosystems that are natural, that have certain things that are happening in various distances away. We were not designed to be enclosed within walls, where if I say something, my voice is coming right back at me. that would like be me standing in front of like 5 trees if I was in nature, and then like a room of trees or something like that. It's weird. It's abnormal. The corner is abnormal in nature. So the fact that those things now exist introduces a whole new suite of problems for the way that we were designed to hear. And that's something I noticed growing up. Being hard of hearing is I had an extra special hard time trying to figure out what was happening, because every sound environment I was ever in was this unnatural thing, right? You put a speaker in a corner, and then it reflects off the back as well as puts the sound forward. So by the time it gets to you, it's phasing out certain things, and it sounds weird. Or it's hitting the back wall and then coming back. And so now you have not one, but hitting the back wall, coming back, and then also going past you and then coming back. You already have 3 sound sources, not including the lateral movement, and then also the vertical and the top and bottom hitting the floor and ceiling and coming back to you. There's all these extra reflections that we're just not used to hearing. And when you're, especially in a mission critical situation like a studio or gaming or something where you need to have just the most direct source of the sound, then you're not getting that with a normal sound speaker. And it's a problem that didn't exist until we commercialized. And now that we've commercialized, we've kind of stopped caring about it because we just kind of got used to it, and we've forgotten that there might be a better way.
Okay. I mean, that makes you think, and that's exactly why I have some whiskey while we're discussing these things, so I can really conceptualize your thoughts. But to put it into more simple perspective, what you're trying to say here, right, is that because of the fundamental way that we're experiencing sound right now, right, like it's pushing sound waves directly at you. No, depending on your environment, that experience will be different, even if it was the same speaker. If that's what I'm understanding correctly, what you're trying to explain out of this.
Exactly. The same speaker takes the same sound and it reproduces it because of the environment a different way every single time.
You're gonna have to move the signal channel a little bit down. You're like right on the
right here?
there, right a little bit, yeah, right there. Perfect.
Cool. Let me show you why. This will make sense, right? Let's start from the end and we'll work backwards. So here is your let's say speaker, right? Here are all the things that are affecting the speaker, right? Your room. The
temperature,
air density, which changes the air density in the room and stuff like that. Exactly. And then the other things I can change it to are the
obstacles.
Exactly. Yep. Room obstacles. Did I spell that right? Obstacles.
So you're almost a PhD student here.
And music. I count to 4.
It's fast.
Room obstacles, and then also what's it called? Orientation. Right. So which way the actually let's put this one on top. Yeah. So which way the speaker is oriented makes a big difference, right? If you ever try turning your speaker around to shoot at the wall, I mean, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and these are just some very few of many things that have this deal, right? And again, this is the thing that studios and people, even like for high-end commercial or high-end residential homes, they spend a lot of money creating these materials and stuff and posting them in their walls to try to absorb some of these reflections and absorb some of these extra frequencies that are going off that are just resonating all the time because it's hard to hear. And so here's the question, right? The $1 million question is, what is your speaker producing, right? Everything involving sound is sound reproduction. So what is it producing, right? What is the source signal? Oh, do I have to actually make it like another one here? Hold on.
You can just copy it.
Why
yeah.
can't I make a
Bear with us. We're learning Miro here at the same time. You know, we're making it work.
Let me just do this. Ah!
There you go.
Oh my gosh.
I love it.
Oh, I see. I had to do either up or down or something else. Okay, hold on.
No, it's all good, man. Like I said, it's not like we use this for all our project mapping
R&D
and all
stuff?
this.
Yeah, exactly.
It's cool.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so your speaker is reproducing what is we can probably call the source, right? And this can be your Spotify, your Apple Music, your streaming, your game audio, your whatever the original is. The question comes into, do you know what goes into making the source?
Please educate me, sir.
So I think something that most people are familiar with is the master, right? The master is the master recording, the thing that the studio will spend, or the game studio, or the broadcast studio will spend a lot of time finessing, bringing it up to proper levels, making sure that it fits appropriately with other things that have been made.
Mm-hmm.
And so before it even gets to your speaker, right, the master has to go into a source, and the source is ultimately the destination. For example, Tidal will be able to play it back at a much higher rate than something like Spotify.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going directly an HD audio stream or HD TV stream or video stream or something like that, it will be able to play back at a higher bit rate with more information than something that's going to be like a live or a what's it called? Something that's super live, or if you have a really low bandwidth internet, it's going to compress it and it's going to lose a lot of information and only keep stuff that makes it barely intelligible. But think of it this way. The master is not the end all, right? If you have what's called a shitty mix, you cannot make a golden master.
Yeah.
And then even before that, if you're not recording it well, you can't get a good mix because you're trying to record through like your phone microphones or some really shitty microphones. If you have shitty microphones, you have a shitty recording, shitty mix, shitty master. And even before that, let's say you're also a producer and using shitty samples.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's kind of similar, but you also record the samples a certain way or something like that. Like if you're trying to make your own samples. If you record your own samples, you have bad recordings, so on and so forth. Coming all the way back to microphones, right? So here we go. This is everything that can go wrong into making it sound bad when it comes out of your speakers, right? So think of this. If we have fantastic microphones, top of the line, Neumann microphone, sounds so good, right? Which records perfect samples somewhere else. And then we use that and the same microphones to make perfect recordings. Then we have a sterling mix, the best you could possibly do, mixed in Capitol Records with the Grammy-winning mixer with a Grammy-winning master to make it sound perfect, and all those frequencies are plush and right up top and it's crisp. And then we send it to Tidal so they can stream it in high definition, and then you play them on your phone speakers. Why do you hate us? Why do you hate me? I'm just a sound human.
I like how it cut out the sound part. It just said human, but
oh really?
There we go. You're still cutting it out. You're still cutting it out. You're gonna have to like lift. There we go. Now you got it going. But I mean, so just so I can once again, like my job here is to take whatever you say and put it into layman's terms so we can all
please, sir, please.
we can all follow along with your madness, but obviously good logic behind everything we're talking about here. So overall, what we're talking about here is, yes, you can have, even if you did have the best speaker, and there's a lot of variables tying into how you're going to experience that sound in the first place through these speakers. There's another issue which comes with how that additional source was created in the first place to then put to your speaker. If that additional source from start of the chain all the way down, if there was one missing link, bad microphones, bad samples, bad recording, bad mix, bad master,
right,
it already sounds bad. But then speaker's the next element, because if that source then moves to the speaker, and that speaker is in an environment where, let's say, the air density is bad, we don't have good installation, we have high ceilings, aka how we did acoustic haven but still made it sound sexy.
Bingo.
That's the end quality. You're going to suffer from it just because the speakers just cannot articulate it out correctly. Is that
exactly
following the logic chain here?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and the other thing to consider is that, in order to get to the point of the source, people are spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, controlling the environment so much so they can capture something good to make it deliverable. And then, by the time it gets to your speaker, there are all these other elements in it that can disrupt the idea. So whatever the person, and even before microphones, right? Here's the idea, the song, right? This is the idea. It has to go through all these different things, all these different stages to finally get to you, the consumer, the person who's finally receiving the image. Do you remember the game of telephone when you're as a kid?
Yeah.
And somebody says, I'm an octopus, and it comes across on the other side as Archimedes' laser delicate pussycat, Like, it's like what? It's kind of, but it's not the thing. And that's essentially what all audio creation, all audio has to go through the same format. Everything has to be recorded. Everything has to be put to a thing. Everything has to be delivered to a thing that then you can download on your end or stream on your end, and then that way you can play out into your environment. And there's all these different elements that cause so many issues. So it's obviously frustrating. and this is also again purely from a music and like a content creation standpoint. As a videographer, a content creator, a media producer, a game maker, or a musician or an engineer, these are the things that we all have to kind of understand as it goes through. And so I think that's why there's been a little bit more attention over on this end in the consumer market to be able to get people at least onto a better version of whatever they might have had beforehand. Now brand names are kind of getting into like the small consumer area of things, but I think there's a fundamental thing that can avoid these issues, plus the other issues that we haven't necessarily talked about. Like for example, a smaller speaker can't reproduce lower frequencies, right?
Yeah.
So something that's super portable is usually not high performing, and so in order to solve all of these and make it make sense for the next generation of audio, there needs to be a fundamental change in how the sound is produced and reproduced.
So
right?
So what you're saying here is like where we're at with the state of audio is we've maximized the capabilities of existing hardware and software. As we talk, we'll go and we'll deep dive into this a little bit because obviously there's still capability changes and the fundamentals around it. But if the fundamental itself, the way we're right now going about audio is not changed, we can't get past these hurdles, these problems that we're talking about here, no matter what we're playing around with. Is that what you're kind of getting at here?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've maxed out what we can do with the current way of transmitting audio or sound. Yeah, which is always and then you take someone like me, right? Someone who already has an issue with perceiving, right? Let alone having all these other issues. I already have a trouble perceiving, even if someone's talking to me directly. So then having all these other issues, for example, if you turn around and I can't read your lips and confirm what you're saying, you could say you're a gentle platypus, and I'd say, yes, I agree, the sales projections are indeed a little bit of a lower pattern for this type of year, And so I had this idea a long time ago, where when I was starting to make music and I was starting to produce and I was starting to understand signal chains, and as a crazy kid with who just got Logic for the first time, and you're like, hey, how far does this go, right? You start thinking like, hey, how far back could you go into the signal chain, and how far back can you go the other way into the receiving chain, right? So I was thinking the speaker has to go to air and then to your ears, right?
Yeah.
What if it didn't go through the air, and you could have the source go directly to your brain and have like this neural stimulation? Because essentially what's happening is that when it goes through the air, it hits your eardrums vibrate and send a signal down through all your ear bones and whatever till your auditory nerve, and then the nerve goes into your brain. That's how you hear, right? What if you can go directly to that spot, right? Take the source, go from Spotify and like plug it directly into your, even if you didn't go through Spotify, like what if you went from your computer, plug your computer straight into your brain, right? To me, I was like, hey, that would solve all my problems. That would solve all, most deaf people's problems are there's something that's wrong with their eardrum or something that's wrong with the bones on the inside of the ear. Sometimes the auditory nerve can be fine, which is why some people that are profoundly deaf are eligible for a cochlear implant. Cochlear implant means that they put the little piece inside your cochlea, and what it can do is that then they touch these little electrodes to your auditory nerve, and it stimulates the auditory nerve as if you're hearing something and getting that sensation of hearing. So I was like, if they can do that, why don't we have a super high-end version of that can make a direct to brain kind of thing? It turns out, after doing a lot of research and talking to Dr. Raymond Goldsworthy from USC, who's doing a huge study on cochlear implants, cochlear implants are hard, and putting a couple of electrodes on is already pretty hard, let alone more than that. I think right now the maximum is like 24, and then what they can do is that they can stimulate kind of harmonics of each one, so that way you can imply a frequency in between the 24 band. It's crazy. It's really cool how they do it, but long story short is there's only so much room in there, and you can't really just kind of like plug this like gigantic plug into somebody's head with all the electrodes necessary to reproduce the entire frequency spectrum.
I don't know if I in the first place, let's just put this out there, I don't know if I would want anything plugged into my brain. I would. I know you would, and that's why you're wearing a lab coat here. The
Neuralink is like the closest thing. The thing I'm most excited about the Neuralink is the fact that it's like, hey, that could be a potential of external stimulation directly to your brain. And as long as it sends signals into your body, you could plug in a DAC or something like that and change those acoustic signals into electrical signals that go into your brain.
Yeah, see, like, that sounds like a start of a horror movie or something. Like, it just wouldn't.
So you're saying you wouldn't be one of the first testing?
I would probably be in the first million. Yeah, like I definitely wouldn't be in the starting range of it. I do think that there is a lot of fundamentals that we haven't really focused on when it does come to like external senses, your neurology, all these kinds of things, right? Like I do think that that's going to change so many aspects of how we perceive the world. Mm-hmm. But I think connecting a singular source to allow me to hear in my brain scares the crap out of me.
So, yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right? Like most things, like that's like the ideal, right? The whole point of like brain-to-brain communication, the most ideal way of communicating an idea to somebody else is to not have to translate it through the language barrier, and then of course the sonic barrier, and then the perception barrier, and there's all these different biases that happen along the way that degrade the communication along the way. So that the ideal is brain-to-brain. Obviously, we can't do that. We're not going to be there for centuries, millennia, who knows. But the next best thing is to use other senses, right? So, for example, your brain still gets stimulation, but maybe it doesn't have to get it purely through one method, right? And so that's something where I think is very interesting, which is, hey, what other senses can we use to determine communication of an idea, right? If you're talking to me, what are the different ways I can perceive that, right? Obviously, my ears. I can perceive what you're saying, and of course, the what's it called, the revisioning of language diorama to be able to make it into stuff that makes sense is one thing. But then, what about the signal itself? Like if the signal is distorted, as I'm talking about, if the signal chain is distorted at any method from the source to the recipient, then you have less of a chance to even try to decipher what is already made, right? So what are ways that you can improve the signal? What if there's a way that didn't have to rely on air and the degradation that happens in the airwaves to be able to perceive somebody's source, right? What if I could feel what you're saying instead of just hear what you're saying?
Okay. And as for this kind of feeling sensation, is that where we're now? And obviously, I'm gonna completely always play the layman's terms of I have no idea what's going on, even though I've been researching this nonstop for the last year. But like, let's go into the world of haptics, right? So are you saying that this is where now the introduction, because obviously right now haptics are the hot thing, right? Like it's everywhere. I mean, we were at CES, right? We saw everything had to do with haptics in one way, shape, or form. Everything. Haptic. It was a buzzword that it was everywhere. It's the same thing where AI became like, everything has to have an AI just to say AI, even if it has nothing to do with AI. You just have to
That's right.
And I felt like that when we were at CES, that's what haptics felt like for me, because things that I honestly had, like, that doesn't need haptics, had haptics. And then things that I think should have had haptics don't have haptics. So can you define to me what haptics is, right? Like, we're talking about the state of audio. It's now slowly moving from this dimension of we're just hearing stuff, limitations with that. Haptics is the first step, right, into another sensation. So what is that? Right.
You remember the PS1 or what was your first experience with haptics? The Rumble Packs?
Rumble Packs.
Yeah.
I feel like that's for anybody who's a gamer, it's going to be a Rumble Pack.
There we go. Yeah. The Rumble Packs, or maybe for the younger generation, the PlayStation vibration, or the analog, or the analog sticks and yeah. That was probably one of the first ways that people experience haptics, I think. And haptics is a sensation of, I don't know if I'm making the correct exact description of it, but essentially it's like the anything relating to get information via touch, right? Haptics is the translation of information into touch, right? So like a haptic screen doesn't necessarily have to be a vibration, right? It could be something that's like like Braille. Braille is almost like a version of early haptics, right? because as you're going over it, there's a certain pattern that gets detected by your sense of touch, and so that was one of the earliest sensations of haptics. Like Braille, vibration is a very I'm not going to say limited because it is rich information, but it's rich information within a very finite range of source material. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Most people understand haptics or even the sensation of information over vibration from hearing somebody's music from another room, right? Because of the way bass waves propagate. If you've ever been to a music festival or a performance where they have subwoofers and you're behind the stage, there's a good chance you're still hearing the bass of what's happening on the stage. And the question then becomes, how much of the total information are you receiving at that moment?
Not
right?
much.
Not much, but enough to know what's happening, right? So, for example, you're behind the stage and you hear what's happening. You say, hey, I know this song. So you're able to understand at least some information of what's happening there. It's not the full breadth of information, but you have enough information to know what's going on, and you can make a decision about it, right? And so, haptics would be one step even before that, right? If you had just the rumblings of a song, you might not know what's going on. So haptics of the total audible, understandable frequency range of the human experience, right, from roughly 10 hertz to all the way to 20,000, or sometimes people can hear above, sometimes people hear below, but roughly 10 to 20,000 hertz is the intelligible hearing range for most people. Most speakers do 20 to 20,000 hertz. The haptics is roughly between the 1 to 20, or 1 to 20 or 1 to 60 hertz is usually the haptic range. That's like sub bass, right? Sub bass. That's not very much information, right? There's literally 19,940 more hertz available of the 20,000 hertz range of information that's being missed from there. Yeah. So I would say that's what haptics is in the grand scheme of like understanding what's happening in a signal.
Got it. So do you think that like overall when it comes to the world of haptics, I mean overall it has application, right? Like it does allow you to create like quick cues. It changes some experiences. You can still add different layers to your audio experience, right? It's still new perceived things. But do you think that even when it comes to the world of haptics, that it's gonna be short lived, or do you think it just has its own proper use case, right? Like it's only intended for like very specific functionality of like direct, like this is a quick like for example PlayStation 5, right? Like it has a new haptics controller, supposedly going to be the greatest thing ever, but when I was playing it, really what it was doing for me is like I really liked that there was trigger feedback, for example. That was unique for me in video games because it's the first time that when I'm using different weapons in different games as a first-person shooter that I actually have to like hold down the trigger and it feels like if I had a gun in my hand, for example, which is unique. And then it has a kickback because that's how, like, for example, a gun would work. And then also if you're in different environments, you can kind of feel a tapping sensation if something's about to happen. Like, it's cool. Like, don't get me wrong, it's cool. Yeah. But I think it only do those small things for a controller. Obviously, there's other use cases.
Absolutely, yeah.
But do you think there's what is the kind of the bring point of haptics if it can only go a certain level of frequencies?
Yeah, I mean, so when exactly, I think you hit the nail on the head there, and also I think I would actually defer to you to talk about what the future markets of haptics might be, but from a technical standpoint, I think we're in the middle of the future of haptics, right? I still think there's a huge future for haptics, haptic information. The best way you can understand that is an earthquake happens and someone's shouting at you that an earthquake happens. Which one are you really responding to? I would think people will respond to the earthquake that's happening, right? Or someone shouts at you and punches you at the same time. You have to kind of digest the information if someone's shouting at you to see what's happening. Or if it's really loud, you're actually responding to the physical wave that's hitting you before you're actually understanding or discerning what's happening with the information. So I think there's a huge application for communication via haptics. Like you said, exactly. I think that was a great point of the feedback that you get from trying to do a physical activity. haptics are going to be the way you get that, not audio, not visual, not something else, but trying to get information without looking at it, just from your sense of touch. I think haptics are going to have a big future, and the thing that's going to make that better is it's basically in the digital world, bit depth is the difference of dynamic range that you can possibly have in an audio signal, and I think that has to grow for haptics as well, in order for haptics to have the full future that it can have, right? Like, for example, it needs to go from like a light tap to a strong like poke or something to you, in order to, and then everything has to be scalable in between that. It can't just be like MIDI levels of 128 levels of difference. It has to be so varied, where it could be very soft to very strong very quickly, or it could be very soft to very long, and then be able to generate what are called haptic textures within a device. That's one of the cool things that I've been researching, at least lately for my dissertation, is how you can actually make textures out of haptic reproductions. So like even like, for example, this can feels like a can because of the way it is, and also it has a weight to it because of the liquid that's inside of it. And you can generate that in a virtual reality world by giving somebody pressure against the fingers, and then also what's it called? Putting an oscillation that's like 1 hertz this way and that way with a little bit of weight to give the impression that someone is moving around some liquid in a can. So there's all these applications. I think that haptics really hasn't gotten there yet because we don't have the dexterity in the drivers and the mechanics for it just yet. There are companies that are working on this, and I think once they kind of get the right strategic partners to be able to implement those demos, I think people are really going to start understanding it and getting more into it. Yeah, but we're like halfway in the world of haptics right now.
Got it. I would agree with that, especially when it ties into things that I've seen. I think there's a lot of application for haptics when it ties into like navigation purposes. So for example, those that might be like cyclists, for example. Instead of you actually having to have a GPS, it could give you subtle triggers like, okay, move towards the right, to the left, you're at your location, it gets stronger, right? Like there's easy ways that you can create through your sense of feeling the signal cues of like, go here, go there, signal there. I think that's going to help with things like augmented reality. I think augmented reality is going to be very hard because a visual cue is not enough. You're going to have to complement it with things like haptics, feeling sensation, auditory.
Yeah, reality is not just audio,
exactly.
visual.
It's not, and it creates a disconnect when you try to push that way. I mean, that's why in the early stages of virtual reality, it had a hard time getting adopted because even though it was cool, it wasn't the level that people thought because it didn't create that realism factor. So I do think that haptics are going to really help build that end. And like, well, as you brought up, like the textures, like that's one thing I would say for the PlayStation 5 controller that they're trying to do. And I would definitely say Sony's really good at trying to maximize the technology they're providing in consoles, for example. So one thing they're trying to do in their one of the games that they had when you bought it, you can wait until all your other games were downloading. It's a super fun game, and it actually allowed that texture. So for example, let's say that there was a windstorm, you could feel the sand and you could feel that kind of subtle texture when you're using like a little slinky thing. It feels like you have like a slink in your hand. So like it's cool that they're able to do that. I think it's very hard to then get a developer to try to then utilize it and create that, because you're now creating more work for a developer who's just trying to create an environment. But it does create the ability, right, to create those environments. So I do think there's a two-sided sphere for it, but it's like it's hard when like it's just PlayStation, right? Like a game developer, depending if it's a PlayStation exclusive, sure they might do it. But if it's a game that you're trying to release on PC, on console, you're not going to focus so heavily on one application that exists only for PlayStation when you can make the best visual game or great experiential game, right, for the whole sphere of consoles. So I think that's one pushback on auditory markets as well, is that it's even though these technologies are coming now to light, it's very hard to change the behavior of consumers knowing how to interact with these new experiences. And then on the developer side to convince them to create it with it, because you're putting more work on them. It's a new workflow. It's things that a lot of times developers, I don't think, not developers, but like engineers that are creating new things don't really consider, right? Is who's going to be using it, in what way, and are you giving them more work? Nobody wants more work. By getting more work in the world of audio, I think that is also why the state of audio really just hasn't changed, because the way it works has worked, right? But I think now we're just moving so far ahead in visual aspects that it's just, if we don't move ahead in audio, visuals are gonna it's gonna hit this
audio and the haptics at the same time. Right?
It's gonna hit a wall. Like if graphics keep getting better in video games, all these things, but the audio experience doesn't. Am I gonna really feel immersed? I don't think so. Like, it'd be fantastic, it'd be beautiful, but I don't think it's gonna cut it for me. And like, my expectations now as a gamer is just getting bigger and bigger year after year, just because these games that are coming out are just getting more beautiful.
Are so visually beautiful, yeah. Especially with that Unreal 5 demo. Holy shit!
talk about
holy shit mode.
Yeah, I was talking and the visual aspect. We're in the pursuit of perfection for audio, but
exactly. Why isn't there something that exists on the same level of holy shit realism in audio? I mean, yeah, there's stuff. There's the Dolby Atmos. Spatial stuff is great, but it's still just affecting your ears and your audio. It's not adding the realism component to it.
Yeah.
Like, it's awesome. It's awesome for what it is. It's awesome for what it is. It's a huge step. It needed to be done. The way to rethink about how we deal with, instead of discrete channels of audio around you, as just everything like a mode, right? As an environment, and then the speakers that whatever you have available will try its best to recreate them. I think that needed to happen. But I think that's as far as that's going to get for right now. There's not much more you can do to discern the difference between here and there than just the spatiality of it, right? So spatial has been great, and spatial has made its way into video games. Spatial has made its way everywhere. Spatial was the shit for like the longest time. Now what? You know, it took a long time to get there, right? I think 360 videos, were already there, but before spatial audio really kind of grabbed hold and made itself to the point where it was semi-indistinguishable from reality, as far as like people talking around you and stuff like that. Right, so visual was already there by the time audio got to the point where it was indistinguishable. But I think you made a great point, which is which is there's so many what's it called? You said about the developers that there's so much hindrance that it would have to put on the developer to what's it called? It's like a catch-22, right? The developer has to make it so that way consumer knows about it, and so that way the consumer can demand it for the company to have the developer make it. So who starts first?
Yeah, I mean that I think that's a hard question that a lot of markets deal with, especially with emerging tech overall, is that I think this is a fundamental issue that a lot of companies have, which is you can't just push technology on consumers and expect adoption. Consumers are influenced by those that say that it's the best. There's that's why there's an adoption curve for any technology. You're gonna have the technology enthusiasts at first that are gonna try anything, and right. AKA us, anything that you could throw at us will experience. They'll try, except from getting a source of audio right to my brain. I will not be in there. And then you're gonna have your early.
I'll let you know how it is.
Yeah, but then you're gonna have your early adopters as well, and the early adopters are really what's gonna kind of you want your early adopters to be really that influence point. Your technology enthusiasts tend to be those that are like, they're gonna try it out, but not everybody trusts them, right? They're not gonna trust the source going into their brain. Then you're gonna have the early adopters, and they tend to be the ones who really influence the market, but it's very hard for a lot of emerging tech to get from early adopters then into the early majority, because the early majority and the late majority make up the majority of the market. And that's why I think a lot of emerging tech it doesn't die off, but it doesn't get the fair shot it gets, because the way that companies try to get into the market, and I think that's what's happened with audio. I mean, I think that there has probably been companies that have tried that we don't know about. That's why they come. I mean, fair enough. I mean, a little bit of kombucha and you're ready to go. But like, yeah, I mean that
4%.
4%. This is like nice. Okay, but
that was a really good point. I don't want to distract you.
No. But like, what I'm just kind of getting at this is like when you look at why I think we're now moving fast, but I think that is why audio really is the state as it is right now, is because there hasn't really been the ability for a company, even if they've invented something, it's been out of a research lab. It's been out of like an area where they're like just trying it out, but they don't have an approach to get into adopt. And if they're not focusing on how do they get somebody of influence to make consumers want it, to then make a developer push back on their CEOs of their company, say, I need to make this because the consumers want this, there's enough demand for it. You need to have demand for a company to create these experiences, like on a game development side. And I think people don't understand ecosystems. Huge thing. They don't understand ecosystems enough.
Like, for example, how does any consumer know about the fact that there's new stuff?
You have to be, somebody has to tell you that that is it, and you have to believe in it. I mean, there's a reason why in the early stages, like the concept of a smartphone was not invented by Apple. They just were, that's a timing question. At that time, you already had complementary technologies that exist, and that's kind of what I'll get at in a second. You had complementary technologies that exist in the market, which made it useful. Internet was not insanely cheap. You have Wi-Fi signals. People are getting more adoption on that. You can actually create a smart device that isn't something that costs you hundreds of dollars just to search the web, and it's not functional. Other companies looked at it and they're like, people don't want this. I mean, Nokia is a great example of that. You know, shout out to Finland here. They looked at smartphones, but they said nah, because they're just like, people don't want this, but they were looking at it the wrong way. They were looking at it, they were too early. It doesn't mean that consumers don't necessarily want it, but you haven't created the excitement around it or having them understand it. And I mean, that's where like business nowadays, like for those that are, if you're like a business student and you want to get a good job, learn how to take complicated technology and articulate it to a consumer, because that is of high demand always, because it's very hard to comprehend something that's new. I mean, how do you articulate a new experience to people if they've never experienced it before? You have to slowly educate them there. You have to show things that are tangible to them, because what might be tangible to the person creating it is not going to be tangible for the majority of people that will experience in the future. You have to create these kind of complementary sets. And I think that goes back, because once you create that demand, now you're going to get the businesses to be like, okay, people want this. Let's talk. Yeah. Let's make a deal. Let's get it bigger. And then once you get that cycle going, you're going to start getting massive adoption. But it's that entrance in emerging tech that I think it's so fundamentally hard, because the ecosystem just pushes back on it at all times.
Yeah, and that actually brings up another great point about how to get stuff adopted by consumers, because like now that I'm finally in the flip side of it, I'm in the doctoral program, I have to look up all these patents and stuff like that. There is no shortage of research of this great technology that each one of them could fundamentally probably change or at least improve some part of human life, right? There's a lot of ideas, a lot of inventors, and a lot of patents out there that are all about this sorts of thing, right? But somehow there is not a way, it's not getting to consumers. Like there's this big disconnect between academia, research labs, and translating them to people. A great example of that are Dml panels, or distributed mode loudspeaker panels. And this drives me crazy, because they were invented as a part... Sorry. Backstory here. Dml panels is basically a panel of something, styrofoam. Think of a cardboard box. A cardboard box or a piece of cardboard is perfect because it's thin, it's lightweight, it can move back and forth really quickly like a speaker membrane, and all it takes is a little thing. Do I have one here? Hold on. Wait, I have one right here. Hold on.
Oops. Oh, this is great. Just seeing your reflection in the mirror.
This is why I love being in the lab right now.
No, I love it. The mirror, you could just see you running and like almost tripping and everything. It's just fantastic. I love it.
Shh, no one saw that. No one saw that, right? You didn't see it? No one saw it? We agree? Good, we're on the same page. Okay, so it takes a little thing like this called an exciter, right? Which is basically just a modified speaker component, because it has everything that a speaker has, right? Any random speaker you pull up here has a magnet, and inside there's a basket, right? There's a basket with a little former. It's called a spider. That's basically the suspension that keeps the driver in the middle, right? Because if the magnet pushes it forward, then it'll stay forward, and if it pulls it back, it'll stay back. But the former keeps it right. The suspension keeps it right in the middle, and then it has a cone on the end of it, right, or something that pushes the air. And this is an exciter, and it has all the same components of it, except it doesn't have a cone. It doesn't push air, right? So here's the magnet, here's the suspension, and then it has this. It's a little puck, and the little puck gets stuck onto a piece like cardboard, and then instead of pushing front and back a cone, it turns the whole piece of cardboard into the cone. The cardboard then moves back and forth and like kind of like does this and stuff like that, and it oscillates at audio rate. And the crazy thing is that this technology was not invented for sound. it was invented for vibration, and it was founded on a DoD grant for the Department of Defense in the UK, for somebody who was like, hey, we could stick little like these things that kind of like anti-vibration devices for fighter jets. So when fighter jets are going out, so that way they don't have to have such like heavy duty communication stuff, they can reduce the amount of vibration, almost like active noise canceling, right? But active noise canceling for the actual window itself. Because if there's too much vibration on the window, it could fall out. It could what's it called? Loosen the joists that are holding the window together, and the stuff that's holding it in. Vibration is bad anytime you want something to work, except for what we're doing. But in this case, they said, hey, let's make something that generates a vibration, and so that way it can reduce it, just like an active noise cancellation. And that's where this shit came out of. And then that company, after kind of realizing, okay, it doesn't work on the what's it called? On the fighter jet level, but it makes some pretty badass slim speakers that have the same frequency response as like a normal speaker with like a whole ass back, like a bookshelf speaker, right? So this is essentially a bookshelf speaker, right? Except it's much thinner than a bookshelf speaker, right? It's because it has one of these little guys right here in the back, right here, right there. There's a little guy. See, you can even tell because it's magnetic. There's a little guy in the back there. There's a little magnet in the back there. And it's basically pushing this little piece of cardboard in front of it, specialized piece of cardboard for them. And then that's what makes a bookshelf speaker sound. It works great for audio. But why don't you have one in your room? If this is so much cheaper and better of a speaker, why don't you have one of these in your office or in your room right now?
Because I honestly, and this is putting it back into perspective, I never even heard of those until you threw it at me for like, so yeah, for acoustic haven, by the way, we could have a cool setup, articulation, blah, 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 blah. I was like, oh, so what are these things? And then I started looking them up. I started looking them up and I was like, okay, yes.
DMLs, baby.
That is very fascinating. So to once again put into layman's terms, you take this thing, right, this puck, we'll just call it a puck, an exciter puck, and we're gonna connect it to a physical material, and that physical material will create sound.
That's right. That's exactly how that speaker is formed. Let me actually draw it here to show the difference here, right? So let's say this is a normal speaker, right? I'm really embellishing the cone here. Right, and then it's like that, and then it's held by a basket here, and then the basket's like that. It's attached to this cone thing, right? And then it has like this big old magnet at the end of it, right? That's essentially a speaker. Let's just pretend I did the cone like that. Oh boy, my drawing's really bad. All right, but then let's say there's a distributed mode loudspeaker, or basically a panel that has a little guy that has everything right there, right? So the basket, the former, and then the puck is just attached right there. So this speaker is shooting stuff out of here at this kind of an angle, right? So the high frequencies are coming really directionally out of here. The bass frequencies might come out a little bit here, and then you might be able to hear, some bass stuff back here, right? But that's roughly the area of how that a normal speaker works, right? A distributed mode loudspeaker, basically a panel speaker. Any panel speaker you've ever come across. You've seen Martin Logan's. They're like these giant floor standing speakers. They all work the same way, right? The sound is literally coming out of the entire thing. It's called chaos, which I love. Chaotically just emanating sound into the room, right? So that way, if somebody's here, right, we'll call him Billy Joe Bob Thornton.
Well, I'm actually really curious. Whenever I draw a stick figure too, or you draw a stick figure, it's Billy Joe or Bob. Those are two options.
Billy Joe Bob Thornton, right? So this person is getting a great sound experience from this speaker, but this person over here, who's going to be Jane Joe Bob, is not getting that much of an experience, right? Sad face. But if you have somebody over here, this person would have a great experience. Smiley face. This person's having a great experience. And then this person is having a great experience because they're all getting the same amount of emanation from the speaker. And what's even crazier is that it has functionality of what's called a dipole speaker. Di meaning two, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pole meaning side. So actually, oh look at he's an arrow for an arm. Also a I promise these guys are happy. No, you're happy. Pretend you're happy. Oh my gosh. Oh damn it! I erased
his head.
I
That's messed up, man.
erased his head. There we go. Let's see if it works. There we go. All right, he's a Cyclops, but he's enjoying this sound, right? Because the
Cyclops
sound
with one
actually,
hand. Okay, or one arm.
and the arm is an arrow, right? Okay. So what's happening is that the speaker is going both directions. It's kind of clearly the most ideal. And the crazy thing too is that pretend like there's a wall back here, right? The sound that's coming out here is emanating in such like a wonderful kind of chaotic fashion. And the stuff that's coming here is also chaotic in nature. Is that the stuff that kind of returns back blends in with this in such a way. This is only getting like low bass frequencies that are then going to kind of come back and then mess with whatever else that's in front of it. But this one's getting all sorts of everything just all over it. It almost sounds more closer to reality than any other speaker ever could, just by the nature of how it's reproducing the sound. It's crazy. Begs the question, why isn't every speaker like this?
Well, I feel like one, they haven't gotten a PhD in sound, more specifically.
There are smarter people than I that are involved in this kind of shit.
There might be smarter.
Really begs the question.
Well, here's the thing. Intelligence doesn't define market attraction, right? Market attraction is defined by understanding how market behavior works, which I think is a very big fundamental problem, because even though this, which you just showed me, is the most logical and the most rational thing of this is way better, right? My question comes down to, one, how much better, right? There needs to be an articulation of how much better for consumers. Cost effectiveness, which clearly it is actually more cost effective for quality of sound.
Right.
And the third thing is use case. And I think that third one is where majority of research in the audio world has failed. Which is
because
let's actually, I want to hear you state this before I bring up my marketing background and my research into this world.
No, so I think it's because of that, because you think that way. And I don't know, maybe my dad, who's the ultimate critic of like all these ideas I've ever had, who's like, well, why wouldn't I use it? Well, how come I'm not using this or whatever, right? If I tried to build one of these and I had it at ears or whatever, and I was like, look, it's like best thing ever. And he's like, but it's too big. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. If it's too small, it can't reproduce the lower frequencies. So you need something else, right? And also, in order to reproduce those big frequencies, you need literally a physically larger panel, which is why there are companies like Martin Logan, who's probably one of the most popular, I think, at least currently, for dipole speakers. And they make electrostatic ones, which is kind of like put a sheet of metal and it kind of moves a piece of metal back and forth with holes on the end of it, so that way it moves back and forth. So it is that type of speaker. It's not excited, but it's driven by this kind of like we're static stuff. But it's floor standing. It's 6 feet tall. It's a 6 foot tall speaker, and not everybody has the money to buy a $50,000 6 foot tall speaker or the space for a 6 foot tall speaker that reproduces all the sounds. So there has to be a compromise, right? For cost and size, this is the ultimate winner over here, right? Because the people that also make these types of things are kind of refusing to budge on quality or do it differently, or maybe haven't thought about it in a way that the consumer really needs, right? It's kind of like audiophiles and people who are just interested in DIY audio stuff that are really looking at dipole speakers and stuff like that. So I think that's why they haven't been adopted. What do you think? What are your opinions on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would always bring it down to if you can't articulate to a consumer a clear benefit, like a clear way that this is way better than anybody else, the cost makes sense according to that benefit that you're talking about, and it like actually solves a problem, because it's like, if I like the sound that I'm experiencing right now, it's like, why would I change it, right? Like if I'm enjoying MP3 files that can't get that much better anyways, I could care less if it's a speaker that's pushing at me.
Right.
But I think it's really it comes down to how do you articulate it. Because if you put it down to an experience that people are having, have you ever been to a music festival and you're on the outside corner, you just can't get that sound experience that your friends are getting, blah, 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 right? Like, you can really reference it to that pain point, what they're having. And you say that this is a case that actually makes everybody happier. Right. This makes the sound so much cleaner. And at scale, this is more cost effective. Now you can get music festivals to adopt it, right? You can get other people to adopt it, which then gets consumers to think about, like, oh, that music festival, I had this crazy experience, this crazy audio, blah, 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 blah. Then you can be like, by the way, you can have that in your home. We can create this panel that adjusts into your room. You can directly have it on your wall, and it creates this audio experience. Now you're connecting experiences that they might be having externally, internally into their homes, which creates you a use case for both ends. But if you just go straight to a consumer and just say, this emanates sound better, and it sounds better, and it's cleaner, I'm like, dude, I like my speakers. Like, they work. They're pointed right at me. They do me justice, and I don't want to spend any more money. Why are you telling me that I need to get this? Because there's no reference point for me physically to understand why this is important. And that ultimately, I think, just falls down the world of audio, is that you have these experiences that have gotten to the point where not just consumers but businesses overall have become complacent to see what is better, what is the next thing, what else can I enjoy, because what works, it works. However, I think that's exactly why this market is just so primed to be changed. It's just like it's waiting for something to come through and just kind of barge through the door and say that, no, audio can be so much better. There's a perfection in audio that can be explained and presented and have use cases, but you have to get to that point.
Mm-hmm. So while you were explaining that, which I totally understand, like there's a whole like story and education aspect that has to totally be happened, but I kind of thought about it when you said, yeah, it's not really, the cost doesn't really matter as long as it's matches, you know, two of the other ones. And so I agree with that, and so I took out cost as a factor, but size and convenience are still kind of the two things. It's a triangle of effect, right? If the way we currently have audio, if we only listen to it through our ears, it's this triangle of size, convenience, and experience, right? If they're too small, in order to increase convenience, then you lose the experience, right? And if you have a big size to have a better experience, then you lose convenience. And if you have a nice experience and nice convenience, I think that's kind of the impossible, right? You can't have a big experience and then have it be conveniently small. The technology doesn't exist to have that kind of situation. You need a big speaker to make a big sound, right? But there's a whole separate area of audio or even perception or haptics that exists that is already serving that portion of having a better experience, and that's the underground world of modding cars and adding bass shakers to cars. If you've ever been to I guess it's popular in the low riding community, where we just sit down like our cholos, and we go. But then some of us became respectful, and we're like, you know what? We respect the hood, so we're not going to let it go outside, but I still want that sensation. And so it just vibrates in my soul. My body's feeling, but the outside is not getting all that information because it's not propagating so much energy to the outside, right? It's so wasteful. All these bass frequencies, like for example, in what's it called? Over here, all these bass frequencies are going all over the place. And they're not controlled. They're not going anywhere. They're not going into the body of the person, right? This person wants these bass frequencies, but they're going all the way in this direction, right? So there are these things called bass shakers, which are designed to deliver the bottom end of the frequency range right into people's bodies, right? And so the fidelity It's like a haptic sensation, but the fidelity is improved 20-fold. So you're able to get all sorts of different frequencies that are happening over here that you wouldn't be able to get from haptics, right? Mm-hmm. And the cool thing is that goes straight into a person, right? So here's Cholo number one over here. Okay, I gotta stop saying Cholo. I'm Hispanic, and so that's man. That's how we call.
I'm out of this conversation.
That's how we call us in the hood, man. They call us the Cholo. Anyway,
you are really
the point is that
it scares me sometimes. But please continue.
Homie number one over here is saying, hey, I'm enjoying this sensation going right to my body. It's all going directly into my body, and it's not getting wasted anywhere else, right? Because I have a suspension or something like that that's making sure that it's not going outside, right? It's only going directly into the body, right? So something that would take a big subwoofer that's making these big sound waves going out like this, right? That would probably be like a 1200 watt subwoofer, right? A 60 watt bass shaker would probably give you a better sensation of bass going into your body. And a lot of smart people have figured that out and have swapped out or enhanced smaller subwoofers in their car with a decent sized bass shaker, right? And 60 watts of power going directly into your body is a lot if you think about it, right? Let's see, how do we explain? What's a good way to explain like a single watt of energy?
The way I'll put this into perception, and this still might not be relatable, but it is for me as somebody who played football before. This feels like a Mike linebacker, which is usually the hardest hitting tackler on the defense, running directly at you and just dropping their shoulder and hitting you if you crank that to full. That is the ultimate sensation get out of it. But that's not how you should be experiencing it. You shouldn't crank it up to full and kill yourself.
Let's say this is like a horse kicking you in the chest. In the face, right? Yeah.
Put in the chest. Let's not put the face.
Is that a horse? There you go.
That is something, but I don't know if that's a horse.
That's a horse. Right? 1200 watts. Let's say it's almost like 4 horsepower to the chest at once. Mm-hmm. Right? But the problem is that you don't feel all of that wattage into your body. It's going into the air, and the air is hitting your body at a certain point of it. It's not going directly. It's a very inefficient method, is the whole point of that. Right? So, I'm going to get rid of my little horse there. So what if there was a way, right? Here's the big reveal. What if there was a way to combine a conveniently sized version of this panel and the efficiency of tactile information to the body of a bass shaker that is a step above the direct-to-body information transference that is reliant on haptics? How can you combine haptic sensation of information and the convenience of a small, excited module into one thing? Wouldn't that be the ultimate audio experience that we could possibly have using existing technology?
Yeah. But,
if only somebody would make that.
Yeah. See, that's the struggle here.
Such a shame. Such a shame.
But, I mean, here's the thing, though.
Well, good night.
And cut. No, but here's where I think... before we ever let our audience really understand where the pursuit of perfection can go, I think it's important at this point to phrase it for you. What is the best audio experience you currently have? What are the best audio experiences that might be out there? Throw them at us and let us educate you and break down what those audio experiences are and slowly get to where we're going when it comes to the pursuit of perfection. I think that is a very important piece because what we're talking about here, and we went through a whole realm of how audio is just, it can't evolve past its limits when it comes to current hardware and software that they're currently focusing on. We talked about how haptics have been introduced, but it has its own limitations and its own use cases, why certain technologies haven't been adopted into the market, and also we had a whole conversation about cholos and when it comes to bass shakers and cars and how it all ties in together. But the one thing I'm very fascinated about, and the one thing I always hear when I talk with people, is everybody has their favorite or best audio experience. I would really love to hear what your best audio experience is. Definitely comment that, whatever platform you're listening to us right now or send us a message. I honestly really want to hear these audio experiences you're currently having or things that you're curious about that you're hearing on when it comes to CES or the news or anywhere. And let's break it down, because I really want to go through the fundamentals of why those audio experiences are fantastic. Like, spatial audio is amazing, and I will be happily breaking down like why that is going to be such an important piece of the audio world. Mm-hmm. But it's only touching like the tip of the iceberg into what can be done with that. Because when we were at CES, for example, the one that was super cool was that one for the UK company for gaming.
With the bar?
With the bar that followed your motion.
That's right.
And as you're walking in a hallway in a game, like let's say there's water dripping on the right side and you're kind of moving your body, it notices where you're at, and then it feels like you're hearing water drip from the right side. That's badass. Don't get me wrong, that's badass. But that's still only leveraging your hearing sense. It's not engaging you into the full scope of audio.
Also, do you remember how hard it was to hear when there's all this other shit happening at CES?
Yeah, it's a true thing, because your ears will deceive you. I mean, it'll all compress, and it's just not going to be that audio that you want because of other things happening in your environment. So yeah, I mean, we're gonna end it for today. That's the state of audio. We're not gonna. This will probably be like 100 episodes until we reveal where things will go. But I think this is a great place to stop and just bring it up to you. What are some audio experiences that you think are amazing that you've had? Let us break it down and let us help you get to the pursuit of perfection of where audio can go and how we can completely change these limitations.
And if budget permits, maybe we'll get one and rip it apart and see how it's made, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
I think that'd be fun.
I will allow you to rip anything up, and that would be fantastic, and I'm just going to sit on the side and just watch it all happen.
At me with that shit, please. Okay.
All right, calm down. You're gonna wake people up. But I hope you appreciated our very first pilot into the holy shit mode in pursuit of perfection. If you did, we're most likely it's going to be available on Spotify and different streaming as well. Of course, this video that you're watching right now will be available on YouTube, and we'll be adding it to our website as well. But reach out to us if you have any specific questions about audio. We're happy to break it down and throw stuff at us. Our goal here is to break down what the world of audio is going to really be like. There we go. You're gonna have to. Oh, there we go. I mean, nice little hyperlink. There we go. I can click on the screen, right?
Just touch it, right? Isn't that our future that we live in right now? We just touch the screen and you go there.
Almost at that point. But yeah. If you appreciated what we're talking about and have any specific things in the audio realm that you would like us to discover on this show, we're gonna be doing this every Friday, super late after doing a whole day of R&D and business work.
A whole week.
And enjoy a kombucha, enjoy some whiskey, and we're just gonna break down audio. That's our life, and that's what we enjoy. But any last comments from you, Ethan? Here.
I'm pretty brain dead from this week, but I'm excited. This is a fun opportunity to finally let loose all the stuff that we've been that we hold in a little bit, and it's nice to be able to break it down. I'm gonna have to do this for my dissertation anyway, so it's good practice.
There we go. Learning how to articulate complicated things, but
That's right.
Thank you for tuning in to Holy Shit Mode in Pursuit of Perfection, and we'll see you next time.